Hey guys, welcome to Pleiadian Point of View. I'm Peyton with Peyton Energetics, and I'm a Pleiadian channel. So in this week's Point of View, the Pleiadians wanted to talk to us about collective agreements. And this is a very detailed subject, so they're just going to scratch the surface today. But there are some important things for us to understand about our collective soul agreements. Now, collective agreements are sometimes known as soul contracts. And all that is because when we hear about soul contracts, we tend to think of it in human terms as something that is written in stone, unchangeable, and that locks us in forever, because that's kind of the earth meaning of a contract. But that's not what we mean when we talk about our soul contracts or our soul agreements. The way these function in reality is they're much more like intentions. And the reason that we have collective agreements is because they let us share common experiences with each other, with other points of consciousness. And they may also be agreements to perceive energy in the same way. So some examples of our collective agreements are that we agree we live on planet Earth. Most of us buy into that. We agree that the clump of energy that we know as a Labrador is a dog. All of us are going to see a dog when we look at that energy. Most of us also agree that the sky is blue. So we have certain agreements to perceive energy in a common way. And the reason that we set it up this way is so we can share experiences with other beings. Because if I looked at a clump of energy and saw a dog, and you looked at that same energy and saw a couch, experience would get pretty confusing. So we have collective agreements that let us have common experiences, to share certain experiences with each other, with other points of consciousness. And we have collective agreements for everything. We have so many collective agreements. But what the Pleiadians wanted us to understand about these agreements is that they are not set in stone. So agreements, as we sometimes call them, sometimes also referring to them as contracts, although that can get us into trouble because we think of them as human contracts. The guides wanted us to understand that these agreements are really just intentions. So we can jump out of a collective agreement anytime we want. So for the most part, our soul agreements, our collective agreements, can be changed. And the way we change them is by changing our intentions and our beliefs. And we can have many different levels of collective agreement. So, of course, as we have talked about, we have those agreements that pretty much every human on the planet participates in. The belief that we live on the third planet from the sun. The belief that water is wet. The belief that the sky is blue. Most humans are subscribing to these collective agreements. But we also have smaller collective agreements. We have collective agreements with our country. We believe we are American or Brazilian or Australian. And with that comes a certain feeling of nationality. We also have collective agreements at the community level, at the family level. So as you can imagine, the subject of collective agreements is something we could talk about for days. But the important thing for us to understand, and the reason the Pleiadians are bringing it up in this week's point of view, is they wanted us to understand that our collective is not always what we think it is. This is not something that we generally have conscious awareness of. So because collective agreements exist at many levels, we can actually have people on our planet who are in very different collective agreements. And one of the huge examples we have in our world right now is what the guides are describing as the separating of timelines. So we have many humans who are choosing a collective path of ascension, And if you are watching this video, you are probably one of those. But we have many others who do not choose ascension in this lifetime. So they have another collective agreement. And where this can trip us up as humans is we tend to look at the world around us and think we are all on the same bus. And the guides wanted us to understand that's not the case. So just because we can see people choosing very different experiences, and we see a lot of that in the world right now in the denser timelines, where people are choosing some pretty challenging experiences. But just because we can see people making other choices doesn't mean they are in our collective. So we have the ability right now to see many different timelines, many different collectives, but it doesn't mean that what we are witnessing is in our reality, that it is our collective. It may be a completely different collective than what you are in, the agreement that you have as your future timeline. And so according to the Pleiadians, the way we move into collectives that are aligned with the future we want to create is by changing our beliefs. Every time we release a limiting belief, we move to a new collective, a collective where that limitation of that belief we used to hold on to so tight doesn't exist and never existed. So we are constantly changing collectives. So one thing that catches us in the spiritual community is looking around at some of the density in the world, some of the lower timelines that are activated, and thinking that that is our reality. But as the guides like to point out, just because you can see it doesn't mean it's part of your collective. So we choose our collectives, or we align with a collective based on our beliefs, based on our frequency. And the more we release any limiting beliefs that we have, the more we move into more and more favorable collectives. So there are infinite collectives. What we see around us in the world is not necessarily our collective. So that is really important for us to understand as light workers, because we can get a little discouraged. We can look around and think that we have to wait for everyone else to wake up, for everyone else to get it. And as the guides say, that is not the case. There are people who are choosing vastly different timelines, vastly different experiences than what you have chosen. So we don't want to get too distracted by the choices that other people are making, because they're not necessarily relevant to our future timeline. However, if we start to flirt with those lower timelines by looking at what other folks are doing, getting into judgment, getting into fear, and y'all, it is tempting to do that. Some of the things going on in the world, it is hard not to get energetically entangled with, but the only way that we bring those things into our reality is when we start to judge them, when we push against them, when we get into resistance with them. That is when we start to drop ourselves into lower vibrational collectives. So our challenge as light workers is to stay focused on what we want to create, because that way, as we focus on that, as we deal with any limiting beliefs that are keeping us out of that parallel reality, we move into a collective that has chosen the same future. So if you stay focused on creating that dream earth that you see yourself living in, release any limiting beliefs that come up as you imagine that, you start to move yourself into the collective that has also chosen that. And you start to separate from any collectives that have chosen density, that have chosen fear, that have chosen manipulation, deception, separation, all those things that we see on display around us. As you stay focused on what you are creating, you remove yourself from denser collectives. And so that is how we start to move ourselves onto higher and higher timelines. So as the Pleiadians like to say, Every time you release a limiting belief, you move to a different collective, a collective that never had that limitation. And by doing so, you raise your vibration. You move to a higher timeline. So our collective agreements are very, very important. It is important to know where we are buying into things just by default or by thinking we don't have a choice. And a lot of times we do that when we start to look around at the choices other people are making and start to meddle in them, meaning judge them, fear them, hate them. So the less we can do that, the more we move into happier and happier collectives. So that is what the Pleiadians wanted to share with us in this week's point of view. Let me know in the comments below, what do you want to know from the Pleiadians? Drop that in the comment box below. And while you're down there, don't forget, hit the subscribe button and the like button if you haven't done that yet. I'll see you soon. Bye.